like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. We are going to get started here in just a moment. For those of you that are out on our Facebook Live, please know that there is a link, and it should be the first link that you see. It's the tiny URL, and it will be for you to be able to access the QR code if you are unable to use your device. For those of you that are on our Zoom platform, I have posted it in our chat box here, and it also is the very first link. It's IDR, Indiana Disability Rights, and then the blue hyperlink is there. My name is Jill Summerlot. I am the operations team leader, webinar coordinator for InSource. And we're going to talk today with Indiana Disability Rights. And my co-host is Lisa Paddock. And Lisa, I am going to let you go ahead and introduce our wonderful speaker today, and you can take it from here.
Thank you, Jill. I do appreciate that greatly. So my name is Lisa Paddock, and I am one of the assistant director, regional director here at InSource, and been here for over 20 years. InSource is the parent training center for Indiana, and we help families understand that special education process. And so we are so glad that you have joined us here today to learn more about one of the wonderful organizations that we have here in Indiana. And so please make sure that you put questions in the chat. We will be monitoring that both Facebook and here live in our presentation. And this presentation will also be up on our YouTube channel later on, and you're welcome to share that presentation with others that need it. So without any further ado, I will now introduce our guest, James Hutton. He is an attorney at Indiana Disability Rights, and he is going to tell us all about IDR, what they are, what they aren't, and how they can serve and how they help. So thank you so much, Jim, for being here today. We are excited to have you here. And again, I'll be watching the chat. Please feel free to put your questions in there, and we will make sure that they get answered along the way. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Hutton, and only my parents, when they were mad at me, would call me James. So I am glad to be here, and I'd like to thank InSource for inviting me to describe for you what we do at Indiana Disability Rights, which, as you heard, we use shorthand for that. We call IDR. I am a staff attorney. I am on the education team. I lead the education team here, so I work alongside. And certainly, I have referrals quite a bit from InSource, and so we're just glad to be partners with InSource and trying to help students who have disabilities in dealing with issues that arise. But IDR does a lot more than just education, and so what I've been asked to do today is try to provide sort of a big picture view of what IDR is and what we do, and then perhaps what we don't do as well. So we will go through that. And just one moment here. There we go. So IDR is the state's congressionally mandated protection and advocacy service. So we provide individual advocacy for individual people, and we do some systemic advocacy trying to make changes to systems in the state. Please make yourself comfortable and feel free again to put any questions you may have in the chat, and Lisa will monitor that as we go along. So my objectives today are to go through, first we'll talk about what is Indiana Disability Rights. We'll talk about what services IDR provides, what services IDR does not provide and what areas IDR focuses on, and there are a number of those. IDR is a part of a bigger network called a Protection and Advocacy Network. P&As, the Protection and Advocacy Agencies, were created by Congress in every state and territory in the United States. P&As throughout the country protect and promote the rights of people with disabilities. And IDR's mission, consistent with that, is to uphold, promote, and advance the rights of individuals with disabilities through empowerment and advocacy to achieve a more equitable society. A little background. Why did Congress decide that this was necessary? What led to that? Because again, this is a federally funded program. In Indiana, IDR is actually a state agency. We fall under the umbrella of the state of Indiana government, but our funding comes from the federal government. And so a little history. What had happened was, back in the early 1970s, Geraldo Rivera, who probably most folks have heard of, was a local reporter in New York. And he did an expose of a school in New York, the Willowbrook State School, which really triggered a national outcry. A little bit about Willowbrook. Willowbrook was a large institution in New York. It was opened in 1948, and it was somewhere that people with disabilities, with intellectual disabilities, were institutionalized, which happened unfortunately a lot in that time. Residents at Willowbrook had a wide range of disabilities, and unfortunately they were not provided with very good care. Even a few years before Geraldo had gotten there, Senator Robert Kennedy had visited back in the 60s, and he had found that residents there were living in what he described as filth and dirt. Their clothes were rags, and he compared their rooms to cages. So it was really, really, really problematic. A few years after that, Geraldo Rivera had his expose, and there was really quite an outcry. They found kids that were grouped together on the floor. They were unclean in all ways, and did not have any kind of adequate medical attention, education, anything like that. And so this was a nationwide story. And as a result of that story, Congress proceeded to establish a network throughout the country of P&As whose purpose is to make sure that the rights of individuals with disabilities are honored, and that they are treated fairly and humanely, and given access to all of those rights. So we have been in existence since about 1975. And originally, we were really, the focus was on assisting people with intellectual disabilities, and that has expanded through subsequent legislation to cover all types of disabilities in all aspects of life, including education, healthcare, housing, and employment, to name a few. And given its history, obviously one of the sort of underlying goals is to avoid institutionalization, as much as possible. Certainly, deinstitutionalization is really what was what got us started. And so that is a little bit of the history of how the P&A system came into existence. It's the reason for it, and where we fit into it here at IDR. So what do? We advocate both informally and through legal representation for people with disabilities. We also monitor settings that serve individuals with disabilities. That could be things like the state psychiatric hospitals. We regularly monitor to be sure that the patients and residents there are their rights are being honored. And we also monitor private facilities, and we monitor some nursing homes and things like that. So we do monitoring of places that serve individuals with disability, and we do that regularly. And related to all of that, we investigate allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So there's three types, basically, of advocacy, and we try to assist with all of them. Certainly, first, we try to assist folks who would like some help with self-advocacy. Individuals use IDR resources to become better informed and to advocate for themselves. And they learn some self-advocacy tools. Now, we provide assistance with that both through coaching that we may be able to do and technical assistance that we can provide. Our website, and I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, we also has resources available that can help with self-advocacy. That's type number one. Type number two is, again, individual advocacy. Here we have teams that are comprised of both attorneys and non-attorney advocates to help when there is a specific issue that has been raised by a person with a disability that is in need of help. And we'll go through those different teams here in just a minute. And we'll just advocate for that individual client in those cases. And then finally, as I had mentioned, we do some bigger systemic advocacy that deal more with the way the processes work in providing assistance and care and benefits to people with disabilities. So that can involve litigation, doing things with like class action lawsuits, where we represent an entire group of people who are being harmed. Sometimes that may be against the state government, even sometimes where different agencies within the state government, there's an allegation that they're not properly following the rights of citizens with disabilities. We have engaged in litigation. We also engage in committees and work groups, both in government and out of government, to try to advocate for systemic changes where necessary to aid and assist individuals with disabilities. We are in consultation with legislators and other stakeholders about policies that impact upon the disability community. And so we monitor all proposed legislation that comes up in Indianapolis for laws that may impact people with disabilities. And we provide we're not allowed to lobby under our rules, but we can educate anyone, including legislators, on what may be helpful, what may be unhelpful for people with disabilities when they are passing laws. And then we have special projects that we do as well. That can be a lot of different types of things. We have recently engaged in efforts to make sure that voting sites, for example, are fully accessible to people with disabilities. So we reached out to counties throughout the state, and we literally at times would have to go out, take a look at the site where the voting took place. And we'd have to evaluate whether it was appropriate for serving people with disabilities. So we take on all sorts of different sorts of projects. Now, there are some things that IDR does not do that we sometimes are asked about. And this is not a comprehensive list, but some of the things that are services that IDR does not provide include disability status determination, legal representation for recipients of SSI or SSDI. We don't provide financial assistance. We don't have the funding to do that. We don't provide direct housing assistance. Now, again, we'll we certainly do step in to try to help people who have issues in their housing related to a violation of their rights as people with disabilities. So we do that, but we don't provide direct housing assistance. We don't do direct services of any kind of related services that sometimes people with disabilities may engage with. We don't provide medical care. We don't provide attendant care. Really, the focus largely, even though we are not all lawyers, it's more in the realm of providing legal advice and services one way or another is more in line with what we do. So I've talked about teams. We do have a number of teams. Again, I am the staff attorney who leads our education team, but we have a number of teams here. We have an abuse, neglect, and discharge team, and I'll talk about each of these teams here in just a minute. We have a civil rights team, an employment team, a healthcare team, a team that focuses on these things I talked about in terms of policy and special projects. We have something called a rep payee review team, which I'll talk about, and a self-determination team, which addresses issues with people who are wanting to make a change to a guardianship. And I'll talk just a little bit about that here in a minute as well. So, abuse, neglect, and discharge. We call it the A&D for abuse, neglect, and discharge. The A&D team investigates allegations of abuse and neglect of individuals with disability. The team advocates for clients who are not being timely and appropriately discharged from institutional settings. Again, that can either be patients at Indiana's state psychiatric hospitals or in private facilities. And the A&D team monitors facilities that provide services to people with disabilities in general to make sure that they ensure safety and an appropriate quality of care. And so they do all of those things. And again, some of those are going to be individuals who call into our intake line who have specific problems with abuse or neglect that they are undergoing. Frequently, it's a family member of individuals with disabilities who contact us with these specific instances that can come. Frequently, it's in either state-run facilities for people with intellectual disabilities. In nursing homes, we get a lot. Some from the state hospitals. And so they investigate all of that. By way of example, in terms of a monitoring situation that we had, IDR recently in recent years had monitored a 30-bed facility for people with coexisting conditions of intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities and mental illness. So it was people had a fairly significant intellectual disabilities were residents there. And throughout the existence of that facility, we would have our advocates go in on a regular basis to this facility, and we can do it with very little notice. We have a right, it's called our access authority, to go into any facility where people with disabilities are being served. We have a law that allows us to go in there. And we went into this regularly for a number of years. And IDR noted all sorts of problems with this facility, including a lack of effective leadership, a lack of oversight that was supposed to have been provided by other state agencies. There was a lack of appropriate living environment. It was extremely unclean much of the time. There were issues with the way food was left out, the way people were secluded at times. There was an overuse of restraint of individuals living there. They were frequently restrained far beyond what was necessary. And we have found, as we were monitoring that there appeared to be a possible overuse of medications that were supposed to only be used as needed. Sometimes those medications would be used far too much. And then also in the end, a real problem with discharge planning. This was a private facility, and so it was for profit. And for one reason or another, in addition to the fact that it was not well maintained and the folks were not well cared for, it was difficult for them to arrange ultimately at the appropriate time to be discharged. And so we saw problems with all of that. We reported our concerns to the State Department of Health and the Bureau of Disability Services. And after a period of time and continuing to provide that information, the Department of Health issued a finding what's called immediate jeopardy, which led to the eventual closing of that facility. And we stayed on the case and continued to monitor as the 30 individuals were transitioned out of that facility as it was closed, to be sure that no one fell through the cracks. And so and ultimately then it was closed. And I can tell you that I personally visited that facility, and it's difficult to describe to you just how inferior the maintenance was and the service was that was provided to these people. It was memorable to me. So that's an instance where, through our regular monitoring of many facilities, where we see problems with specific facilities, we continue to monitor even maybe a little bit more closely. And where necessary, we try to work with the agencies in the state that license those facilities to make changes, up to and including, in this case, closing down the entire facility. So that's one example of a fairly recent example of something that happened as a result of the good efforts of our A&D team. And again, though, they don't only do systems; they do individuals who are. It could be just individuals, could be anywhere, who are experiencing abuse and neglect, and we go in and try to investigate and advocate on behalf of those individuals. Next, we have a healthcare team. Our healthcare team advocates for clients when a medical provider refuses to provide treatment due to a client's disability. It doesn't happen really often. We have had a few times where I can't get into all the details of it, but we have had clients with autism, for example, that ran into problems with doctors who would not provide certain treatments due to that. Something the healthcare team spends a lot of time on is doing appeals of eligibility denials for Medicaid home and community-based service waivers. So what happens is that there are a pretty good number of individuals with disabilities who need financial assistance through various Medicaid programs to have the care and services and support that they need. One of them in particular that we do a fair amount of involve what are called community integration and rehabilitation waivers, the CIH waiver. We help appeal when folks are denied these waivers. And the waivers basically means it's funding that people can be provided through these Medicaid programs is what a waiver is. It's essentially funding so someone can get more support that they need. So we do a decent number of cases where individuals have applied for those waivers, that funding, they're denied, and then what we will do is step in and help appeal that denial to get very needed funds for folks who need those. In addition, the healthcare team appeals involuntary discharges from nursing homes. Again, that's a problem that happens. Nursing homes, there is law that basically prevents nursing homes from just automatically, in every instance, just simply discharging someone when they see fit. There are certain rules and procedures that they have to go through. And so we do get involved in appeals of those attempted discharges that should not happen for folks with disabilities. The healthcare team also advocates for hospitals to provide ALS interpreters and other medical providers. That one, again, doesn't come up terribly often, but we certainly do see several of those a year where people with a need for interpreters are not provided them, and we step in those situations. And then finally, the healthcare team will at times advocate for nursing home residents to have service animals where appropriate. So that's sort of an overview of our healthcare team. As I mentioned earlier, another team we have is our policy and special projects team. This is not one that is as public facing as some of the other teams. So this is not one where individuals call into our intake line and would be assigned to the policy and special projects team. This is more of a behind the scenes team. Our policy and special projects team monitors legislation and policies that affect people with disabilities. So again, that's probably about half of their time is spent trying to make sure that there is appropriate legislation and that there is not inappropriate legislation. We provide education to try to help in that process. Again, as I had mentioned before, one of the special projects that our team did involve voting rights. And in fact, that's one that we always, every election, do monitor to some degree what is happening with voting, and at times that we've had larger voting projects as well. Each of the teams I've talked about at one point in time or another has had their own special projects. My own education team is in the process, for example, of developing a special project to go in and investigate and monitor education that is being provided to students with disabilities within juvenile detention facilities and or jails. So if they are somehow incarcerated in some fashion, institutionalized, we want to make sure that those students are still continuing to get the education to which they are entitled. So that is a project that has not started, but we are sort of in the planning stages of trying to do a project on the education team for that. And there are similar types of special projects within all of our teams. And the special project team oversees those. Next, we have the representative payee review team. That team reviews the records of certain representative payees to ensure that Social Security beneficiaries that they serve are not being neglected or exploited. And this one is something that I did not know a lot about, to be honest with you, before I came to IDR. But what happens is the majority of the reviews that that we do are assigned to IDR by the Social Security Administration. We are sort of their contracted representative to check into and do these reviews for the Social Security Administration. And ideally, the Social Security Administration likes to do those on about a 3-year cycle. Within every 3 years, there would be reviews done. Organizations as well as individuals can and will be chosen for reviews. And also, if IDR, through whatever contact it has with a rep payee, thinks that there's a need for a review, something triggers a yellow flag or a red flag to us, we can also suggest to the Social Security Administration that a review be done of any given rep payee. And in that case, usually we will be assigned to do that review. What is a review? Well, a review consists of tabulating a full calendar year's worth of the financial records of a Social Security beneficiary to see that those funds are being handled appropriately. In that review, our team will see how much Social Security money had come in to the recipient. We'll go through and determine what it was spent on. We'll confirm if there are appropriate receipts for large expenses, and we'll and kind of balance that against making sure that the needs that exist are being funded appropriately with those benefits. In addition to just looking at records, though, our rep payee review team will interview both the payee, so the person receiving those Social Security benefits, and the beneficiary and the rep payee. So both the representative payee that's supposed to be taking care of those funds will be interviewed, and the beneficiary themselves, the recipient of the funds, will be interviewed during those reviews. And typically, those will happen within the home of the beneficiary. So the reviewer can kind of see what the needs are and what the environment is versus what the expenditures are, and try to make sure that that's being done appropriately. So once they've done those reviews, so what happens, right? Well, a lot of things can happen. Review findings can range from discovery of financial discrepancies, whether it's theft or misuse of money, sometimes they'll discover in the course of doing that there are health and safety issues that are discovered while these reviews are going on. And if that happens, those are reported to the appropriate agencies like Child Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, things like that, if that would come up. And then sometimes if there's a really, 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 really big problem with what we find, we can report that to the Social Security Administration, and sometimes that particular rep payee could be found to not be suitable anymore to participate in the program, and could be subject to removal. And the other thing that the team wanted me to share was, I guess a question they frequently get is whether family members, when a family member is the representative payee of a person who's a beneficiary, can the family members be subjected to a review? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And so the advice would be to family members that just be sure that they keep an actual separate monthly ledger, even if it's just a handwritten. It can be on a computer, it can be handwritten, but something almost like the old school checkbooks to keep a running account of money coming in and money going out is very helpful when we're dealing with family member situations. We want to be able to see that where the money ultimately went. The money, where it's a family member situation, you don't always have to have a separate account for that money, but there does have to be an accounting. There has to be sort of a checkbook type system of some kind to keep track of that money. So we have an entire team here dedicated to doing those reviews on behalf of Social Security beneficiaries. And then one of our larger, certainly larger, and I think all the teams are important, but a particularly important team is the Civil Rights team. Civil rights can cover a lot of areas, and so this is just intended to be an example. This is not everything, but some of the things that the team deals with includes housing. It could be discrimination in access to housing, and again, to a reminder, we always are looking for if there are disability rights related violations. That's obviously Indiana disability rights. That's our focus. So it's not just issues with housing per se, but it's housing issues and access issues that are related to a disability. So we do that with access to housing. We get involved where reasonable accommodations or modifications are necessary for someone to live in and enjoy their home. Sometimes in the housing arena, we deal with physical barriers to housing and the design and construction of housing. I know that even though I'm not on that team, we do get in situations I know with where there at times, depending upon the setting, and there may be a need for a ramp, for example. Sometimes there are access issues where really a ramp is necessary. We get a fair number of those, and the law is pretty detailed. There's some situations where people do have to put in ramps. Sometimes they don't, but we do deal with that pretty regularly. In addition to housing, the civil rights team does work related to public and government entities. So where there's discrimination in access to government services or programs or activities, we step in at times and provide advocacy for that. And also whether in those situations where a reasonable accommodation is necessary to obtain access to services, programs, and activities, we'll step in and provide advocacy as well. Going on that same topic, sometimes we will be faced with a situation again where a person requires an auxiliary aid or service to communicate. There are various different communication tools that sometimes people need that they're not provided in order to receive the governmental services that they're entitled to receive, and we will step in and advocate for that. And as with the private sector, also with government entities, we do get involved with physical and architectural barriers to access in government buildings. I had mentioned one place that came up in a special project was with voting rights. We wanted to make sure that there were no barriers physically to people with disabilities being able to access voting machines in the 92 counties of Indiana. So that is something else that the civil rights team does. I have a couple of just real quick examples. Again, the civil rights team does such a broad spectrum of things. These are just real narrow issues that had come up that we provided assistance on. We did have a client who had pretty significant physical disabilities and was required to use a walker, and she had been attending art classes at a county art building in Hancock County. And unfortunately, the building lacked physical access for people with disabilities. It had steps both in the front and in the back to access the building. There was no ramp. And our client, it was extremely difficult for our client then to make use of that programming. We got involved and contacted the people that were involved in Hancock County. And advised them that under the particular circumstances of that building, really there was a requirement under the Americans with Disabilities Act for a ramp to be installed. And within about 3 to 4 months, there was a ramp for the back stairs to that building that allowed access to it. So that was something that in a fairly short time frame in the scheme of legal cases, someone came in, could not access programs in a building. We got involved, and that access was pretty quickly provided. And so that was a good result for us. Just a second quick example of the kind of a case that the civil rights team has done. We had a client who is deaf and had been released from a prison sentence and was on parole. And the parole department refused to provide him with an American Sign Language interpreter for his individual meetings with his parole officer, and also for the classes that were a required part of meeting the terms of his parole. they wouldn't. I mean, he could not hear or participate in those meetings without an interpreter. We he contacted our intake department. We opened a case for him, and we began a negotiation with the Indiana Department of Corrections. And in a pretty short period of time, they arranged for an interpreter to participate in all of his required one-on-one meetings with his parole officer. And additionally, they waived his requirement to attend these various meetings. It would have been, due to the nature, I guess, of the meetings, it would have been difficult for an interpreter to function appropriately. And so the state went ahead and waived the requirement that he participate in those group meetings. So again, we have somebody who is being denied access to government services in terms of the parole process that he was required to participate in. He had a barrier. He came to us. We reached out to those that could make a change, and he was able to complete his parole requirements with that assistance. So those are the kind of things that we have, and those started with an individual reaching out to us through our intake line, seeking help. I guess I'll take a quick aside here as I continue, and then I'll continue talking about the teams. But the intake process itself, we do have and I should have it with me. I unfortunately do not. But if you look us up online or anywhere, Indiana Disability Rights, if you reach out to us to our phone number, you will be guided to an intake person. We have two really great individuals who do most of our initial intakes, and they can talk with you about whatever issue you might be having. They will take some notes. They may request some documentation if there are documents involved. And after you talk with our intake team, they will then forward that on to a group within our office that meets every single Monday morning to review all of the intake requests. And that team every morning will discuss every request that's referred to us and make a decision whether we're going to be in a position to provide services and open a case for that individual, or sometimes just due to the fact that we're a fairly small office with a limited amount of staff and funding, sometimes we cannot open every case. But we as a team talk through every single intake case that's presented to us. We talk amongst ourselves, and we almost always make a decision right at that time whether we will or will not be able to open a case for each person who has contacted us, and then we'll reach out to let everyone know what we're going to be able to do or not do. And so that process should not take very long. If you were to call in to IDR, 90% of the time, probably more than that, within a week, you should know whether we're going to be able to provide assistance, and if so, what that assistance is going to be, or whether we're not going to be, and if we can't. And unfortunately, we simply don't have the resources to open every case, even every case that probably is deserving of some assistance. We just don't have that ability. So when we are not able to open a case, we do try to always include, if we can, some possible referrals for other places that those individuals might be able to get some assistance. One of those places, frequently in terms of education cases, is InSource. And I think InSource also sometimes does the same thing in reverse and sends folks to us, which is great. So I just wanted to take an aside for a second to know how does this intake process works. That's the gist of the intake process. Going back to what I had been discussing, though, we were talking about the teams that we have here. The next one is our employment team. Our employment team, consistent with its title, advocates for employees with disabilities to address allegations of discrimination, such as the denial of a reasonable accommodation at work. People with disabilities, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of the law here, but generally speaking, where a person with a disability is able to do a job, but just requires a reasonable accommodation, not something that's would be considered unreasonable to the employer, then the law requires that. So we handle those in the employment situation. The employment team investigates wrongful terminations of people due to their disabilities. The employment team assists clients in accessing vocational rehabilitation or centers for independent living. Sometimes there are issues with getting the appropriate help through those, and we can step in and assist with that. We address concerns about Ticket to Work Services, which is a program in Indiana relating to employment for people with disabilities. And the employment team will support Social Security beneficiaries to understand work incentives that are in place for them. It's a fairly complicated area of law. I myself only very generally understand it. It is complicated. So if you or someone you know is a Social Security beneficiary and you have questions about working and the work incentives that are part of those programs and what you can and cannot do and so forth, that is something that we can at times provide some assistance for as well. Next, we have a self-determination team. The self-determination team helps adults with decision-making support that they need to avoid and escape unnecessary guardianships. That addresses situations involving problematic legal guardians, where there might be abuse, where there might be neglect, where the legal guardian might be financially exploiting the protected person that they should be assisting. Those are some situations. The self-determination team offers counseling regarding potential decision-making supports and instrument preparation services. So sometimes preparing some of the documentation related to guardianships. Again, we do not establish guardianships. That's sort of going the other direction from what our interest in. Our interest, certainly there are times where guardianships are perfectly appropriate, and we understand that. But generally speaking, IDR is here not to establish new guardianships. Ours is to make sure that the guardianship process is not overused. So our focus is on either terminating guardianships where they're not necessary, or by changing those guardianships to somehow make them less intrusive or more supportive of the protective person. That's what we do. And finally, the self-determination team provides technical assistance to attorneys, to government entities, and to community stakeholders, including schools and nonprofits would be two examples when they have questions about the establishment of guardianships, of terminating guardianship, things like that. Again, I mentioned this just a moment ago. What the self-determination team does not do does not establish a guardianship. That is left for others. We do not establish them. Again, we will, where appropriate, help to terminate guardianships or to make necessary changes to make them more effective for the person being protected through them. We also don't locate or provide referrals for legal guardians. Sometimes we will get a question, hey, folks are thinking about establishing guardianship and are looking for who they might be able to use as the guardian for that guardianship. We do not provide, we don't track those folks down. We don't provide referrals for that. And then finally, what we do not do when it comes to self-determination is anything involving a guardianship based solely on the fact that the protected person is a minor. There may be times where a minor is under a guardianship, and that's the reason. The only reason for the guardianship is simply because they're not 18 yet, and it may be that the guardianship is somehow inappropriate or needs to be changed. we don't handle that, because again, our focus is on helping people with disability rights-based problems and issues and violations. And being a minor is not a disability. So we do not involve ourselves if the only reason for the guardianship is that the individual is not yet 18. Now, if it's a child who does have a disability, and the disability is a factor in the guardianship, then sure, we absolutely will get involved in those. But we just don't do them if the only reason for the guardianship is that the person is a minor. And then obviously the education team. I lead the education team. Basically, I say team. It's really for typically 3 people. I am the attorney assigned to that team, and we have 2 non-attorney advocates. Both of those advocates have worked in the education setting for many years now, and I can tell you they are both excellent. The education team advocates to ensure that students with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. We address schools' noncompliance with a student's IEP or a 504 plan. Frequently, we will get intake calls basically that a student that has an IEP, the school just isn't following the IEP. It's not necessarily a problem with the terms of the IEP, but it's a problem with compliance. We get a lot of those cases. Sometimes we will have cases where clients are being denied an IEP or a 504 plan. We will get involved in advocating for that eligibility where appropriate. We really, I mean, we do a very broad base of things in the education arena. We nowadays we get a lot of bullying cases that are based on disabilities. Those are tricky. Can be difficult to figure out a pathway for how we can deal with that. We get kids. We get placement. Frequently, we get placement issues. We will have students who perhaps are only receiving instruction for a small number of hours a day or week, and their parents will think that that they should be getting a full day of education. We have a fair number of those, and I suspect InSource does as well, where we will get involved to try to work to appropriately increase the amount of instructional time for people in terms of their placement. In terms of what we do provide self-advocacy tools. We do provide some technical assistance where we provide just sort of education to families and to schools and to lawmakers on issues involving both the IDEA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Again, these are things I've mentioned. FAPE is what all students are entitled to, and so virtually all of our education cases somehow have something to do with FAPE. It should always, students are legally entitled to be in the least restrictive environment. So again, if we go back to what really triggered the initiation of the P&A system to begin with was outrage over the vast overuse of institutionalization. So folks were in the most restrictive environment when they didn't need to be. And that continues to be sort of what is very important in the education setting, that students should be in the most mainstream setting feasible. And that is one that we are constantly providing assistance on. We provide some assistance in the education realm on assistive technology when students require it and are not being provided with it. In this day and age, unfortunately, all too often students with disabilities are subjected to inappropriate restraint and inappropriate seclusion. That happens a lot. I can tell you that another area that we run into in that having to do with restraint and seclusion are issues with school resources officers who are overstepping their bounds at schools and leading to involving the criminal justice system where it should not be involved. That happens quite a bit. We do try to provide some assistance when it comes to transition from high school to employment, and that can tie in, as it says here, with our employment team in trying to plan for that appropriate transition. Certainly, one simple thing we always try to do is be sure that our student clients are being involved in those sort of transition questions and planning from a fairly early age. All too often, schools seem to wait until very late in the game to begin thinking about transition issues. So we do provide assistance on that. I'm not quite sure why we have civil rights in here. I apologize for that. So, and I was going to mention just a couple of examples before I finish up for the education team. Again, we do a lot of different kinds of things. So just a second here. One example we had recently in the last year, we had a student, and again, I'm going to change names and not give any revealing information here. We do maintain confidentiality. That's important to us, and we honor that. Generally speaking, though, we had a student in middle school who was in a jurisdiction where they had an alternative school where a handful of school systems went together and created this alternative school, and they could refer students to it. And our client was attending this alternative school for half days, and he was attending regular school the other half. And turns long story short, he was the nature of the alternative program was such that it was triggering behaviors related to his disabilities that he wasn't experiencing when he attended the mainstream school for half of the day. He was having these problems because the fit just was not very good to be in an alternative school. So for quite some time, his parent had advocated for him to his placement to be changed to full-time in the mainstream school. That was refused and refused and refused. He continued to have his behaviors triggered by being in essentially the wrong setting in that alternative school. IDR got involved. We had a mediation. We felt like we got some improvement, but we weren't quite able to get the school to agree to full-time in the mainstream setting. So he was still doing some in the alternative setting, and that continued to be problematic. So we filed a due process claim. And long story short, once we filed the due process claim, we had a settlement negotiation meeting, and the school finally, and this is after years of asking for it, within about a month of filing the due process claim, they agreed that this client would be attending full-time at the mainstream high school, which he was getting ready to start. So that was one that was a good benefit. All too often, we've found that, again, when people are moved into a more restrictive setting, oftentimes they'll be told by school that, then we'll be able to work toward a less restrictive setting. But what tends to happen is once that placement happens in the more restrictive setting, people kind of get stuck there. And so we were able to get that student the full-time where he could do his best work as a student and as a young person. And then finally, a quick example, we had one recently with a very young 7-year-old little girl who had very severe disabilities and required oxygen as needed, and the use of a wheelchair, and sometimes a feeding tube. This client was nonverbal. So there were a lot of medical issues and disabilities. The school system, though, she should have been going to school, but in first grade, the school system advised her parents that basically due to staffing and training issues, they were unable to provide her an education at the school, and they could not, in fact, even provide transportation because there would have been a requirement for a person to ride with her that was appropriately trained to deal with her medical issues, and the school simply said, you can't come to school. And they ultimately eventually said, well, she can come to school, parents, but only if you'll transport her there and back. We can't transport her, even though she was entitled to that. So this little girl had to basically sit at home for about half a school year while the school refused to allow her to go to school. Ultimately, it became mainly a transportation issue. Parents reached out to IDR. IDR got involved. We very quickly filed a request for mediation. We had mediation, and the school, we made very clear that actually, I don't think we filed mediation. I believe we filed for due process on that as well immediately. We had a meeting to reach a settlement, and the school knew that they legally didn't have a leg to stand on. And so very quickly, within less than a week, we were able to help that client to get to school. She now is attending school every day. Her mom sent me a picture of her, big smile on her face at school. And we were glad we were able to play a small part in helping to make that happen, because unfortunately, sometimes what happens is these parents, very knowledgeable parents, very caring, involved parents, but just got stonewalled. And at times, fortunately, when IDR gets involved, not always, but sometimes we're able to make pretty good and meaningful, quick progress by getting involved, where even a very, very motivated, intelligent, caring parent just could not, they just wouldn't respond. So that was really a good result. And so we deal with just any number of different type of education cases. And then finally, I'm sorry, one more thing. I did want to point out that on our website, if you go to and you use your search engine for Indiana Disability Rights, we do have a website kind of within the state of Indiana website world. And all of our teams are described on that website. Our process, our intake process is described. And also, if you go to that website, there is a page for downloadable materials. And so if you have an interest, by all means, I suggest you explore our website. So like the downloadable materials that to help with self-advocacy include all sorts of things on a fact sheet on, when are you entitled to a service animal? There's a form for how do you go about requesting a reasonable accommodation at an apartment. We have a form there. You might have questions about, when is it, what sort of discipline is okay and what isn't for students with disabilities. There's a school discipline fact sheet. So again, there's a broad range of fact sheets from most of the teams involved that you can actually go find the topic that is perhaps most relevant to you. You can download a written document dealing just with that topic from our website. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that as well. So with that, that's the big picture. That is Indiana Disability Rights. We are here. We're just, we work with InSource quite a bit. They do excellent work. We look forward to continuing with that. But we are here not only for questions involving education, but as you can see, pretty much a broad range of things involving people and the rights of people with disabilities across different areas of their life. And so please reach out to us, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate you and your being here today. This has been so informative. I did want to real quickly, for those of you that are out there, here is the Indiana Disability Rights website. And over on the side here to the left, on my left, is the places that you can go for the information. There is how to contact IDR. There's the staff. There's Mental Health Advisory Council. A lot of really good information over here for that. So please feel free to peruse their website at your leisure. It is very, very informative.
And Jim, I visited and I just hit again on the downloadable materials. Excellent information. We would encourage anyone to visit. It tells about who's on your team. It covers such a plethora of great information that we are so appreciative of having you come today and talk about the different teams and how IDR extends further than just maybe what we would think that it did. So this has been very informative. And Jill, you beat me to the code, to the QR code again. And so we do hope that anyone watching our webinar will make sure that they scan that QR code. We are InSource, which is the Parent Training Center for Indiana, and we help families. We work with schools and community stakeholders, but mainly we support families to understand that special education process. And Jim is right. We work together and send families when their need is more significant to IDR for them to look at. And we're so appreciative to have him on here today and telling all about the services that IDR gives and what they don't give, because it's important for individuals to know what organizations to reach out to for certain things. So we are so glad that everyone has joined us today. So please make sure that you scan the QR code and do the training sign in and survey and get that certificate, even if you're watching later. So I don't have any questions on my side, Jill.
I don't have any that's shown up on our Facebook Live either, but I just want to, I've been around, and Lisa, you've been around long enough that we were around when it was called iPass. That's how long we've been around.
We were.
And so it really has evolved, and, our realm is 0 to 26. And, that's the realm that you and I work and live in. And I did not realize, I knew, but I just didn't realize how much that the IDR did encompass. And so thank you so much for pointing that out to us, Jim, because I think it's important, especially with people with disabilities. I have a child that, he's a 28-year-old man that has a disability. And so there is a lot of information that can get lost, and for them to be able to have a place to go to if they have questions. My own personal experience with IDR was that my son had questions about a job that he was doing, and the only place that we could think of was IDR to ask some of those questions. And it was very informative. And it was very quickly, we did the intake, and it was just a matter of a day or two, and we had some information that was sent to us. And, I knew about the process of the Monday meetings and everything being discussed. And the nice thing about that was, whenever we were told that they weren't going to open a case for my son, but what they did do was send a letter and have additional information for him. And I thought that was so helpful because, he wasn't just left there with, no, we can't help you. It was, no, we don't have the resources at this time to help you with what you're looking for. However, here are additional resources. Here is additional information. And that's what I found to be so nice, was that we just weren't sitting there with, well, where do we go from here? So it's not just a one and done and, you know, you're left out there. So I do appreciate that support. And again, you know, I didn't realize how much that IDR did encompass. But for those of you that are listening and watching, please go out and look at their website, because it does have a lot of really good information on it. And again, you know, InSource is from, we help families from birth to 26. That is our realm. That's what we do, and it's mostly educational. Where IDR is a broader spectrum of that. And so please go out there and look at that. You'll be surprised at what you find out there. So Jim, thank you very, very much for being here. I still don't have any questions.
Okay.
So yeah, no questions. And I don't see any that's popped up in our chat box either on Zoom. But again, if you are watching this on a replay, please remember to use that QR code. We are a nonprofit organization. We rely heavily upon that information for our people that pay us to do our jobs. So if there's no other questions, Lisa, on your end, then I guess we will say we will see you in 2 weeks. And that will be the end of our webinar for today. Again, Jim, thank you so much for being here. Please come back whenever you would like.
We look forward to that.
Thank you so much. I will take you up on that. Thanks.
All righty.
Thank
Everyone
you.
have a wonderful day.